Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Sir Hunt on X, live from Cincinnati, Ohio, in the United States. Hope everyone had themselves a wonderful 22nd of April 2025. The weather's starting to get warmer in most places, especially here. Finally, because it felt like forever before warm weather actually got here. So we're finally enjoying it. As you can see, for the second straight night, I'm doing the show outdoors, and you'll see more outdoor shows from myself as long as this weather continues to cooperate because I think it's a nice thing for me to just enjoy the breezy weather and as well as talk to you guys live on this live stream show. Um, Lots to get to today. Hopefully, everyone had themselves a good day. And it is, of course, NFL draft week. And of course, we know all the rumors and all the yada yadas that's going to take place. Today's a part of a two-part series for myself. I'm going to be digging into the needs of what each team needs. Tonight, I'm going to do the AFC. Tomorrow night, I'll be back with the NFC. I don't do the mock drafts and the players because it's too much to digest because everyone's mock draft sometimes is equivalent of people with having nothing better to do with their lives. So I've never been on mock drafts. I focus on the needs because it can go all over the place. Of course, there's 7 rounds. Some players have more picks, some have less. Everybody knows the details of it. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right into it here tonight. I think we'll start with the AFC East. Of course, the division winners were the Buffalo Bills. Went up to the AFC title game, lost to Kansas City. They're going to need some depth, obviously, on the defensive side, especially at cornerback and at defensive line. We talk about the defensive line. You have 2 guys, Larry Ogunjobi and Michael Hope, who's serving 6-game suspensions because they can't stay off the PEDs. And, of course, you have 4 players on the defensive line, especially picking up Joey Bosa on a 1-year deal, who all have expiring contracts. So that D-line is going to need some depth and retooling moving forward. Secondary, especially the cornerback position, needs help, especially after they sent Keir Elam out the door. And they got back Dane Jackson from Carolina, but they still need to fulfill needs there. Another target at wide receiver could help Josh Allen, obviously, but they showed the emergence of Shakir this past season with the contract extension. Played very well this past season. Keon Coleman still has maturity issues. He has some growing up to do. So another wide receiver target could help them immensely. Of course, the question there is what are they going to do with James Cook, who's going to be in a contract year. Once a long-term deal, nothing's going to be matched, I guess, but that's where they're headed. Buffalo has more like depth needs more than anything else. Still going to be a cream of the crop in the AFC conference when we talk about Kansas and Baltimore. Of course, they have the AFC East already locked up regardless of what they do because they still have the premier quarterback in that division in Josh Allen. So, but the defense needs some retooling moving forward, some depth pieces to probably get over the Kansas hump and probably get to the Super Bowl, which is about time they should start making the way toward that level. So that should be their focus going into this draft. Moving on to the other AFC East teams, look at the Miami Dolphins, who have their work cut out for them on defense, especially talk about with their general manager, Chris Grier. Of course, they want to deal Tyreek Hill and Jalen Ramsey. Javon Holland, their safety, went out the door, went to the Giants. But they're going to need to redo that offensive line again because Tua got basically killed last season, and it didn't help that Teron Armstead, their standout left tackle, announced his retirement a few weeks back. So they're going to need to rebuild that. They're going to need some cornerback depth now since they're going to try and move Ramsey. A replacement for Javon Holland at safety is in need. Probably going to need another tight end. But they have the work cut out for them, especially on the offensive and defensive fronts, because they're just lacking in depth bad, and they're going to need all the help they can get. I mean, good luck trying to trade Tyreek Hill because you're not getting 2 first rounds for him. Maybe you shouldn't have overcompensated for him when Kansas City made him available a few years ago because now you're paying a stiff price for it, and Chris Grier, their GM, is going to have their work cut out for them. I mean, they just signed Tua to a contract. They try to rework Tyreek Hill's contract. Not too long ago, they extended Jalen Waddle. Those 3 are fine, but the rest of the team, there's work to be done. Speaking of other teams that have works to be done, is, of course, the other 2 teams in the AFC East, the New York Jets and the New England Patriots. Now, the Patriots had a solid offseason when it comes to free agency, filling some nice pieces with some key players. They could use some weaponry around Drake May and retool that offensive line. Of course, they're linked to the offensive tackle, Will Campbell, which I think will be the pick at that position when they pick 4th. And I think that's going to be an ideal pick because obviously when you have a rookie quarterback like that and who has promise like Drake May has, you need to start to find protection for him. And I think Will Campbell is going to be the right pick for him at that particular position. And of course, they need a ejection of talent at key positions, especially a wide receiver and tight end. I mean, you have the corpse of Stephon Diggs in that roster, which gives him a target. But how good is it going to be after the ACL tear he had not too long ago? I mean, they're saying he's ahead of schedule, but we'll find out because ACL injuries, can get real tricky. But they still need an injection of talent, of targets when it comes to wide receivers and tight ends for the particular draft to help out standout Drake May. And of course, more offensive line help because they had the so-called rated worst offensive line in the NFL. Shoot, they found a way to have a worse offensive line than the Cincinnati Bengals. That's saying a whole lot about the New England Patriots offensive line. So good luck for the Patriots. They're trending in the right direction. They had a solid free agency. Now it's time to build on the draft. I mean, they're in the A.J. Brown rumors with Philly, which is not going to happen, simply because they have something going on in Philly that the Patriots aren't that deep in need of a wide receiver, but they can just find one in the draft and just go on from there. They do have Stephon Diggs. A.J. Brown is fine in Philly. That's not going to happen. Patriots fans need to chill out when it comes to wide receivers. And of course, the other team of the AFC East is the New York Jets. They get Justin Fields to send Aaron Rodgers out the door. By the way, shout out to Aaron Glenn for telling Aaron Rodgers to his face that he's no longer in the plans, making him fly over New York to tell him that. Aaron Glenn deserves a shout out for that. That already changed the culture immediately. More playmakers at wide receiver and tight end are needed. They're linked to Tyler Warren, the standout tight end of Penn State, which I think would be a good fit because Justin Fields needs targets. They still have Garrett Wilson on that roster. They stand out wide receiver from Ohio State. Going to need someone opposite him. They had Alan Lazard, which I don't know where he's at right now. Probably going to need to retool the defense and secondary. You still have Sauce Gardner in that secondary, but the depth there is lacking. Going to need a retool there. Help in the offensive line is necessary. You talk about, especially that defensive line. The whole Hassan Reddick saga didn't help them at all either last season, but now he's no longer there. They could probably start the whole thing from scratch. But Aaron Glenn made the culture in his mission statement earlier this week when he told Aaron Rodgers to his face, "You're no longer in our plans," and he did it the right way. Aaron Glenn should be commended for exactly how he did it and how he handled it. Kudos to Aaron Glenn. Now we go to the AFC North, and this one's a bit all over the place because even though two of the teams made the playoffs and another finished 9-8, there's still glaring holes that need to be filled. In Baltimore, the offensive tackles were solid. I mean, Ronnie Stanley had a good year, and of course, their starting out center Tyler Linderbaum was stellar, but their guards got killed for the most part last season, so they need to reinvent in the offensive interior. They need to retool their secondary and as well as a defensive line because they're losing key pieces all over the place due to the salary cap. Of course, not too long ago, they signed Roquan Smith to that contract extension. That kicks in, and they're about to lose key pieces. They're linked to the standout safety Malarkey Starks, who I think would be a great fit next to Kyle Hamilton in Baltimore to help solidify that secondary, who just got roasted at times last season, especially in the two meetings against Cincinnati. Then again, who doesn't? But they need to do some retooling as they move forward. Maybe it's a sort of a Super Bowl or bust year for Baltimore, given that they're about to lose key players all over the place, and that especially on the defensive side, which may need some retooling or rebuilding somewhere down the line. But I think biggest thing, of course, for them is in the trenches at the offensive guard positions, an edge rusher. Because remember, a couple years back, they signed Davion Clowney, and he was a productive force on the edge for them. And that 1 year he was there, they decided to let him go. Haven't filled a void with him there, although Adolfo Owe was solid for them last season. But Baltimore has some basically retooling to do. But Eric DeCosta has done a good job with the draft and free agency in recent years. I expect him to fulfill the holes that they need to be filled. Of course, they're also linked to the supposed rumors with Jair Alexander, the cornerback from Green Bay. Nobody knows what's going to happen there as of yet because not even Green Bay knows what they're going to do with him. It's going to probably depend on what happens on draft day. So that's Baltimore. For Pittsburgh, you've been looking for a Ben Roethlisberger replacement, and it's just been egg on your face. You try the short-term gap with the veterans like Russell Wilson. That didn't turn out. You got Justin Fields. You let him walk. The Kenny Pickett draft was just egg in your face. Now you brought back Mason Rudolph. I would just sit with Mason Rudolph and take a flyer on someone in the third or fourth round, like a Will Howard or something. Not let mess with these use up has-been quarterbacks on one-year deals that don't get you anywhere unless you're guaranteed to win the Super Bowl, which Pittsburgh, the rest of their roster is not even close. I mean, they're going to need some depth on the offensive front. Probably another running back after letting Najee Harris walk. And eventually they're going to need to formulate their defensive interior because their standout Cam Hayward is 36 years old. And they're going to eventually need to take care of that. Probably another wide receiver as well. You know, of course, a spontaneous combustion in that particular locker room with George Pickens and DK Metcalf, who have known to be volatile personalities. I wish them nothing but the best. But as long as there's Mike Tomlin over there, I'm not going to say anything. He knows how to get us 10 wins during the regular season. So we know about that. Over here in Cincinnati, if you draft anything other than defense in this draft, it's an automatic F, period. Everything's got to be fixated on defense because you have 10 guys at the. Let me back up. Every player not named Trey Hendrickson, you should just send them out the door because they were just abysmal, dreadful, and useless, and just rebuild the defense for every player not named Trey Hendrickson. You keep Trey Hendrickson, you send everybody else out of here, period. And you use a draft to rebuild around a defensive roster because everybody not named Trey Hendrickson was a no-show last season. The stats backed it up. Actually, every player not named Trey Hendrickson on that Bengals defense doesn't even belong on NFL rosters. Their play showed it, and that's why the defense was what it was last season. So they talk about Walter Nolan in there, Jihad Campbell. I don't know what they're going to do in the first round. But every pick needs to be fixated on defense, defense, defense. Anything else is an automatic failure, and we're not going to have another discussion. Because I said all along, you have every player on the defensive side, not named Trey Hendrickson, has no business being in the NFL, and you guys want him on the roster. Congratulations. That's why your defense was a laughingstock the past 2 seasons. Now it's time for you guys to get NFL qualified talent on that defense to help Trey Hendrickson, and you guys can actually start to build a defense there. But good luck with that one. Actually, we talked about you guys in a second. Of course, the other news is in the draft is up north in Ohio with the Cleveland Browns. Everybody's talking about Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter. I said if they drafted Abdul Carter, it would be the smart move. But we know we're talking about the Cleveland Browns. So we know Cleveland Browns and smart moves equal oxymorons, which means they're not going to draft Abdul Carter. They're going to draft Travis Hunter because that's what the Cleveland Browns do. They don't like being smart. But they do need to retool that offensive line, which was basically a solid formation for the last couple of years till they started losing pieces. Maybe the key piece was their O-line coach, Bill Callahan, who went to Tennessee to be with his son, Brian Callahan, who was the head coach down there. A pass rusher opposite Myles Garrett would do wonders. That's why I said if they were smart, they would draft Abdul Carter. But we are talking about the Cleveland Browns, so we know the Cleveland Browns don't do smart things. They're just going to do Cleveland Browns things and draft Travis Hunter. They're eventually going to need a running back because we know Nick Chubb is coming back again from another leg injury. I mean, is he the same number one running back? More than likely not. They're eventually going to need to find one somewhere down the line. In a solid depth running back class in this particular draft, I'm sure they could probably find one if they choose to draft smartly. But then again, we are talking about the Cleveland Browns, right? Now I'm going to go to, see how this here for a second. Go to the AFC West. The division winner, Houston Texans. You almost got C.J. Stroud physically killed in that AFC divisional game at Kansas City. I mean, he was sacked, 7 times and hit another 14 times? I lost count after the 4 sacks and the 10 hits. I mean, he just got beat up as the season wore on by better defensive lines. When we talk about the players that in the offensive line that they had to mess with the defensive lines. Sorry, my connection's not all that great. But they definitely need to retool that offensive line and retool it badly simply because they need to be able to protect their franchise quarterback, C.J. Stroud. And I expect that draft to be nothing but offensive line help. Of course, they sent Laramie Tunsil to Washington. More of a cap move than anything else. They do need a playmaker opposite Nico Collins at wide receiver. They tried it with several players that didn't pan out. Of course, Tank Dell's probably not going to come back this season. Maybe not for another year and a half after the gruesome injury he had on Christmas at Kansas, which was just something I would not want to watch. But that was what Houston is facing. Maybe add some depth to the secondary. But, of course, number one priority for them should be to protect C.J. Stroud, their offensive position, their standout quarterback, and that's where it should be priority number one. For the Indianapolis Colts, they're going to need a young tight end for Anthony Richardson or Daniel Jones. Interesting to see how that quarterback battle is going to be in the preseason and training camp. You're talking about long-term solutions at their offensive line, especially when you lost guys like Will Fries and Ryan Kelly. Probably Braden Smith is going to be out the door. They're going to need another edge rusher. Running back depth behind Jonathan Taylor could be something they could find in the draft because Jonathan Taylor doesn't stay healthy much. When he's healthy, he produces, but he just can't stay healthy. Standout running back is Jonathan Taylor, obviously, but he can't stay healthy. So that's basically what Indiana has to do. We go to Jacksonville. They made the $55 million investment in Trevor Lawrence. Probably need to find him another receiver, a tight end, a running back. Retool that offensive line. Now, knowledge that offseason has been solid. They know they need a disruptive defense, and their general manager James Gladstone was able to take care of that and basically get them in the right direction. So, but they do need more targets. He does have the standout Brian Thomas Jr., who had a stellar rookie season for Jacksonville. But if you're going to invest in a $55 million quarterback like Trevor Lawrence, you better start putting together some form of a winner there, simply because that investment is going to be down the tubes if you don't. And you guys are going to get it in Jacksonville. Everybody's still questioning whether he's worth the $55 million contract that was offered to him. It's time for you guys to put up or shut up when it comes to proving it right down there in Jacksonville. And, of course, Tennessee, we know what they're going to do at quarterback. They're going to draft Cam Ward, so quarterback's off the board. Probably get another wide receiver if they want. Maybe the bigger need now is a Harold Landry replacement at the edge position simply because he's gone. But Tennessee has a ways to go, but they are going to draft Cam Ward, and they probably start in the right direction over there. Simply put, Tennessee's going to be a while. Now the AFC West. Of course, the cream of the crop is Kansas City. Offensive line and defensive lines need retooling, especially the left tackle position where it was just by committee and it didn't pan out. They tried Joe Thuney there in the Super Bowl, and who just got killed by Josh Sweat. And basically now they traded Joe Thuney. They're probably going to need to retool that offensive line. But I said all along, there's a reason why Brett Veach is the premier general manager in the NFL. He'll figure it out. He'll head them in the right direction. Put them back as the cream of the crop in the AFC. They're the team to beat in that conference until further notice, and that they're going to be able to be just fine. Probably going to need to find a Justin Reed replacement, but they did draft Jaden Hicks last season, and he showed flashes of what he can do. I expect him to have a bigger role this season, but I expect him to get deeper in the secondary in this particular draft. For the Los Angeles Chargers, I always want to call them the San Diego Chargers. Biggest needs here is more explosiveness at the wide receiver and tight end positions. You have Ladd McConkey, who played very well last season. You probably need to shore up the offensive line interior. Who's going to be the defensive interior replacement now that Joey Bosa is out? That's going to be a question. But that's how San Diego is going to be headed. Sorry, Los Angeles. I keep thinking of them as a San Diego Chargers. That's how they were in my time. But they need more offensive firepower for Justin Herbert. We've solidified that offensive interior. They already got Joe Alt as their left tackle from last year's draft. I expect him to take a step up and be better this season. Did a solid job protecting Herbert. But, they're still in the same division as Kansas City, so they're not going to overtake Kansas in the AFC West. Probably going to get a wild card spot by default because too many questions in the AFC outside of the big three being Kansas, Baltimore, and Buffalo. Of course, the team that shocked everyone and made the playoffs was the Denver Broncos. Not much really needed. Maybe a receiver to replace Courtland Sutton would be a good one. They could use a running back one because he went by committee last season. And they have a need probably for another cornerback, maybe opposite Patrick Surtain. Solidify that cornerback depth. Add some depth pieces on the defense, which really doesn't need much help because that defense was just lights out for the entire season. Maybe get a depth piece or two to add on to what they already have. But maybe the biggest thing here is looking for a number one running back and a eventual wide receiver who can possibly replace Cortland Sutton when his contract expires after next season. But not much really there for Denver. I expect Bo Nix to be better because he was trending upward as the season went on in the 2024 season. I expect him to be better in 25. They're going to be in the mix for the playoffs as long as he's there, and that defense is still the defense because they were elite last season. Maybe add some depth pieces, and I expect them to be among the top. And of course, I conclude with the Las Vegas Raiders. Let's just say you need everything. Okay, I could put a bunch of clothes on the Las Vegas Raiders, and they'll still feel naked. Okay, that's the thing with the Las Vegas Raiders. They need help with everything, and they need to fill voids everywhere. I mean, maybe a big one is, of course, the running back position, which is why they were linked to drafting Alshon Jeffrey, which is a hot topic from like picks 5 through 10, which the question is going to be who's going to draft him in those positions. Maybe that's why the Raiders have been linked. I mean, but key pieces on their defensive side need to be fulfilled simply because they lost key pieces in free agency, especially in the linebacker and cornerback positions. But then again, who wants to play for Mark Davis? Reminds me of when nobody wanted to play for Al Davis, who then was for the Los Angeles and Oakland Raiders, because nobody wanted to play for Al Davis because Al Davis was all about the theatrics. Same thing now. Mark Davis is about the theatrics, and nobody wants to play for him. Maybe Tom Brady being over there now could just change the culture a little bit, and we'll see where that one goes. But we'll find out. But the Raiders need boatloads of help, and we don't know where to start with them. That covers my NFL needs in the AFC draft. The AFC teams, whoever needs picks in terms of needs. I don't do mocks. I don't do that sort of thing because it's too much to partake, especially when we talk about 7 rounds and so many needs each team has to fill. Now, a little bit of more local news here in Cincinnati. And it looks like the Bengals and Hamilton County finally reached a deal for supposed stadium improvements. Rumors are a loan was pulled, which I don't partake in it, and I think it's just crazy if they did. But at least they're doing the thing that they should have done 5 years ago. Sit at the bargaining table and start to talk about putting something together instead of asking for bailouts from the state. We'll see where this one goes. Nothing's set in stone yet. And they have till June 30th for the lease because after June 30th, the lease would be set to expire in 26, which means the Bengals can do whatever they want. But it's a step in the right direction. I will give them that. I need to see more for the conclusions. But as I said, they need to stop asking for bailouts and learn how to take care of their own selves. Because as I always say, if you don't take care of yourself first, nothing else matters. Right now, the Bengals don't want to take care of themselves first. And as a result, nothing else matters. But they have something going with Hamilton County. They decided to take shots at the NFL for whatever reason in the news I read earlier, which doesn't help their cause at all. But at least they're going to try to stay in Cincinnati for the short term. We'll see where this one goes. Remember, at June 30th, they can extend the lease 2 more years, which takes them to 2028 when they do, which I expect to happen. But everyone in Cincinnati needs to just shut up. More on them later. NBA playoffs. It is, of course, ongoing. Yesterday, Kawhi Leonard had a standout performance. I've always said with him, and for someone who's been hit and miss in his career at that superstar status, that he should be more than what he is. And last night showed just how great he could have been had he stayed healthy and on whatever he is doing. I mean, we know the fiasco that ended in San Antonio, got traded to Toronto, won the title, and just left. But of course, it turns out he was basically toxic in that Toronto locker room. If it wasn't for the 2 finals and 2 finals MVPs that he won in San Antonio and Toronto in 2014 and 19, respectively, people be asking a case of what might have been. Now we're saying the case of this guy should have been more than what he is because of all the injuries that just added up. You're talking about an elite, high-level 2-way player who could do it on both ends. And when he turned it up in the 2014 finals in games 3 through 5 for San Antonio when they beat Miami, that just shows how the potential Kawhi Leonard had. Greg Popovich, did something and it worked. because they got the revenge on Miami to win the 2014 finals. And of course, it ended not too well in San Antonio, gets traded to Toronto. He wins a championship there for the 1 year and then goes to LA. Many reasons why it hasn't worked out in LA. The injuries primarily. But last night was just an example of what Kawhi Leonard could have been had he stayed fully healthy and stayed dedicated to his craft and found ways to just get better instead of relying on his natural talent, which he has a lot of. I'll acknowledge that. But he never stayed on that straight path. Of course, injuries didn't help. But he should have been a case of a guy who could have probably been a top 20, top 25 player in NBA history. He had that kind of talent. Maybe a top 20 wing player when you talk about the guard forward positions, because he was a unique character. I mean, a crazy wingspan with those hands as big as a laptop screen. And basically, we talk about lockdown defense. He was basically the gold standard when it came to it when he was healthy. The back-to-back defensive player of the year when he was in San Antonio. So, I mean, he had the talent to be more than what he is, but never panned out for whatever reason. I mean, if it wasn't for the 2 titles, he would have been a case of what could have been, but he did get those 2 titles. Still managed to have a productive career, still probably goes to the Hall of Fame, but it's a case of a guy who should have been more than what he was, and largely because of the injuries and the work ethic. I mean, what more can you say? Of course, the 2 games going on right now, Indiana was spanking Milwaukee, and Oklahoma City handling Memphis. I said all along, if Memphis wins 1 game in this series against Oklahoma City, it's an upset. And it would be a disappointment for Oklahoma City because they're that much better than Memphis. I expect a sweep there simply because Oklahoma City is just fully loaded at every position. Question there is, can Chet Holmgren stay healthy the rest of the way? If so, then they can go to the next level. Now, a historical night in the sport of boxing. 2 guys at different times became the heavyweight champion of the world. One in a more shocking moment than the other. One maybe not stunning, maybe not shocking, but more stunning than shocking. I just get to the first one real quick. There was the first meeting between Michael Moore and Evander Holyfield. Moore comes from the canvas to win a close majority decision. Odd scoring in the fight, but maybe in terms of the general optics, you could say Evander Holyfield should have retained the title. It's that old adage, did you do enough to win the championship from the champion? And the feeling is that even though Michael Moore got the decision, understandably so, with some crazy close rounds and weird scoring, that he didn't do enough to win the title from him. Even his own trainer, Teddy Atlas, said it. And basically, Michael Moore just took it as almost like as an insult, and more credit was given to Teddy Atlas for pushing Michael Moore to that point, because there were times during this fight, Michael Moore was going through the motions for I don't know what reason in the biggest fight of his life at that time, simply because you got to go out there and get the championship from the champion, especially one who was respected as Evander Holyfield, who just regained it from beating Riddick Bowe 6 months earlier. But the thing is, we saw maybe a glimpse of what Michael Moore was as a heavyweight versus what he was as a light heavyweight. Because when he was a light heavyweight, he was a go-getter. When he was a heavyweight, there were times he went through the motions. I mean, 5 of 7 guys, when he went, including this fight at the time, went the distance with Michael Moore, and it seemed like Michael Moore was just content with settling with decisions instead of going after getting explosive knockouts. I mean, he carried. I mean, a year before he carried the corpse of James Bone Crusher Smith the distance, which didn't look good for him. But an interested spectator was at ringside for this fight. That may be none other than Big George Foreman, who called the fight on then it was known as TVKO, now was known as HBO pay-per-view till it closed its doors. Don't think George Foreman called this fight without having any kind of extra interest, because he was studying everything very carefully with the 2 fighters, especially in hindsight now Michael Moore, because now it was revealed that after Moore officially got the decision, George Foreman goes to promoter Bob Arum and says, make me the Moore fight, which was set for November 5th, 1994, and the rest is history. George Foreman was commentating that fight, and we know why he was commentating that fight, not just because he had a job to do to collect a paycheck while performing his duties as an HBO broadcaster. He had an extra interest in seeing what these 2 guys did and knowing there was a chance for him to get the heavyweight championship of the world, which he did 6.5 months later when he knocked out Michael Moore to do it. But it was 31 years ago today at Caesar's Palace where Michael Moore reached the pinnacle of his career, his heavyweight career, when he got the decision over Evander Holyfield. We know what happened to Holyfield after that. The health problems, all kinds of speculations in and out of the ring, all of the turmoil, his retirement at that point. But he did come back to beat Ray Mercer, the third fight with Bo. And of course, the year after that, beat the brakes off of Mike Tyson and ascend himself to a top 10 all-time great heavyweight. They did rematch about two and a half years later in Las Vegas. Actually, check that. 3.5 years later in Las Vegas, where Evander Holyfield just beat the brakes off of him, floored him 5 times in the last 3 rounds to get the stoppage win at the end of the 8th round to get his revenge. But this was Michael Moore's pinnacle, April 22nd, 1994, when he won the heavyweight championship from Evander Holyfield. And the other one was, of course, a major stunner. Maybe in hindsight, given everything that led up to it, maybe we shouldn't be shocked because it is the heavyweight division. It was Hasim Rahman upsetting Lennox Lewis in Johannesburg, South Africa. This was supposed to be some sort of a keep active fight for Lennox Lewis till the Mike Tyson thing came through. But Lennox Lewis weighed in a few pounds heavier than he should have. Basically took Rahman lightly. And we saw what happened. The 1-2 that crashed Lewis to the canvas in the 5th round. Lewis was down and out for the count. I mean, he hit him so hard, Lennox Lewis asked Emmanuel Stewart what happened. What happened was he got caught. His head hit the canvas. Party was over. Hasim Rahman's 5 minutes of fame. Of course, we know what happened 7 months later. The rematch. Before that, they had the fight in the ESPN studio. Then, of course, Hasim Rahman taunts Lennox Lewis in the weigh-in. Then when the fight happens, Lewis flattens Rahman in the same way Rahman flattened Lewis to regain the heavyweight title. And that was Hasim Rahman's 5 minutes of fame. The weird thing about Hasim Rahman is he's had highlight reel knockouts, but he's been the victim of some of those highlight reel knockouts. I mean, the biggest one, of course, was in 1999 when he fought Oleg Moskayev the first time, where Oleg Moskayev hits him so hard, he goes through the table. It winds up on Jim Lampley's lap. Here's another knockdown drag-out match in 2001 against the African Corey Sanders, prior to the Lewis fight, where both bodies were hitting the floor. Looked like Rahman was going to be knocked out, and then down goes Sanders out for the count. That got him the Lewis fight. Of course, the second Lewis fight where basically his face was turned so sideways, they actually had a poster of it, of his face turned sideways when Lewis hit him with that right hand. And that was basically all she wrote. I mean, he was down and out for the count, and that was the end of him. Shortly thereafter, the fight with Evander Holyfield, where an accidental clash of heads, and Hasim Rahman's forehead looks like the size of a softball because of a couple of headbutts. Fast forward to being gift-wrapped a fake heavyweight championship because Vitaly Klitschko's body fell apart. So he makes a defense of it in a rematch against Oleg Moskayev. And what happens? Oleg Moskayev beats him again. Hasim Rahman he had the talent. I mean, when he pasted you with that right hand, because he's a heavyweight, it could have been it. Because he did that to Lennox Lewis. He did that to several others. But in case of another guy who never did anything more than what he was, we know he was a one-hit wonder when he shocked Lewis in 2001. Anything he was before that, anything he was after that, was basically who Hasim Rahman was. Very inconsistent. Controlled the 2 fights with David Tua, but didn't go to the extra gear to finish the job. Was knocked out in the first fight, settled for a draw in the second fight, although some thought Hasim Rahman should have been given the decision, yours truly being one of them. But Hasim Rahman just had a weird legacy and a weird career. I mean, basically, he's on the highlight reels for all the wrong reasons, especially when he got knocked into Jim Lampley's lap when he couldn't finish Oleg Moskayev the first time. And Oleg Moskayev didn't do anything, and he's spectacular. I mean, he just kept coming and coming and coming, and you had a feeling that he was going to get to Rahman. And then when he got to Rahman, he more than got to Rahman. He got to Rahman, put him out of the ring, landed him on Jim Lampley's lap. What a weird legacy for Hasim Rahman. Ugh. I wouldn't be the end of that legacy. I mean, was a good fighter, never ascended to great status. When he pasted Lennox Lewis, you know his 5 minutes of fame were up. He tried to get an interim fight before a Lewis rematch. They had to go to court for it. Court ruled in Lewis's favor. An immediate rematch had to happen. You know what happened there. Lewis was pasted Rahman, and that was all she wrote. Lewis would get 2 more fights. He would do the world a favor by obliterating Mike Tyson in 8 rounds. Then the terrific fight in 2003 against Vitaly Klitschko, which was stopped at the end of the 6th round because of the nasty cut on Vitaly Klitschko's eye, which caused chaos all over the place, but it was rightfully stopped because that eye was a mess. But Lennox Lewis's place in history is forever secure. I mean, a top 6 all-time great heavyweight, probably the greatest heavyweight to fight out of the UK, bar none. A lot of worthy candidates, but Lewis is still number 1 in that regard. But his place in history is forever secure. And when he pasted with Rahman in the rematch to win the world title for the 3rd time, that basically secured it. I mean, anything he did after that was just gravy. A terrific career for Lennox Lewis. But Hasim Rahman, 24 years ago today in Johannesburg, South Africa, had his 5 minutes of fame when he pasted Lennox Lewis with a perfectly placed right hand. Even Lennox Lewis said that punch knocks any heavyweight out because it hit him on the right spot, which was the point of the chin. It's crazy how heavyweight championship fights work these days. Even back then, one shot, that's all it took. Reminds me of what took place in 1980 between Mike Weaver and John Tate, where John Tate had the fight completely won, and then the left hook out of nowhere, and John Tate's life changed forever. That's heavyweight boxing for you. Haven't been much heavyweight boxing like that ever since, but it tells you how great the heavyweight division can be. I mean, as always said, if you're over 200 pounds, anybody has a punch. Anybody can tell you that. I could go to more of a laundry list, but that's the crux of it. And that'll wrap up this edition of Sirhan on X. I will be back tomorrow night to preview more NFL draft. I will up over to the NFC teams and among many other things. Hope everyone had themselves a wonderful rest of the night, the 22nd of April, 2025. And as always, make self-care your number 1 priority in life. If you don't take care of yourself first, nothing else matters. If you take care of yourself first, good things will follow and come your way. Always think about that when you take care of yourself first. Enjoy the night. Take care of yourselves. God bless. Anybody who misses the show can catch me on Apple, iHeartRadio, and Spotify if you have those particular apps. Enjoy the rest of the night. See you tomorrow, and God bless.